Welcome to the Industry 4.0 Community Podcast, put on by 4.0 Solutions, hosted by Walker D. Reynolds, sponsored by IIoT.University. This is a pre-recorded podcast with my good friend and colleague, Mr. Jeff Knepper. You may hear me refer to him as Dr. Knepper, one of the good guys in the industry. This is the first time Jeff's been on the podcast where we're doing like just a one-on-one, and the goal today, we're actually going to talk about where we see the market going. But let's start with Jeff. Why don't you go ahead, for those who don't know who you are, and by the way, most people in the community do, but why don't you just go ahead and give a quick introduction and actually talk a little bit about kind of what you're doing now as opposed to what most people think you actually do.
Okay, sure. Right. Hey, Walker D. Reynolds, this is my opportunity. Is the
Yes.
D David? What's the D?
The D is D period. My mother never gave me a middle name. I do believe that it was meant to be Dennis, because my brother has a middle name of Dennis and my uncle's middle name was Dennis, but she just gave me D period. So my name is Walker D. Reynolds.
I kind of like it that way. There's a little mystery around it. That's good.
She always said, I wanted you to have a strong name. You know,
okay.
Strong. And I'm like, does Walker D. Reynolds sound strong? But that's what she said. Yeah,
I think so. Yeah, I like it. All right. Well, I'm Jeff B. Knepper. So there you go.
B for Brad?
No, man. So my dad was a baseball player. And kind of a fun little fact, my dad, if you look up Ricky, R-I-C-K-Y, Knepper, I want to say it's the 1971 Major League Baseball draft. It was either 70 or 71. My dad was first round, third overall drafted by the Philadelphia Phillies.
Was he really?
Yeah. You know, the 70s baseball is a little different than it is today. So that didn't play out quite the same way as it would have, today. But
that was pre-free agency.
Right.
And the farm system wasn't nearly as big. I watch a lot of old MLB games. In fact, at night, I watch a lot of 70s classic.
Okay.
70s classic games on YouTube. And in fact, last night I watched the 77 All-Star game, which took place in San Diego. And Vita Blue started. I think it was Vita Blue. I can't remember who started. Oh, and Jim Palmer. That was a game I actually watched last night when I went to bed. But yeah, 73, that's pre-free agency. That was like, you get drafted by the Phillies and you sign a contract with the Phillies. They own you for life. Yeah.
You're a Philly. And so, long story short, my dad's favorite baseball player was third baseman for the Baltimore Orioles, Brooks Robinson. And I've just got to say, Brooks just recently passed. So my namesake, I've got probably 13 pictures of me as a kid with Brooks Robinson. My namesake, my middle name was after Brooks Robinson. And I don't know that there could have been a better example of a man to be named after. Growing up in Maryland, the Orioles, obviously my team for life. But so there you go.
Brooks, I think he won 18 Gold Gloves, right? He won 18 Gold Gloves and
14.
14. Okay.
Yeah, but I'll take it.
18 was Maddox. Greg Maddox won 18 Gold Gloves as a pitcher. Yeah. Okay. All right. So what do you been up to?
Oh man, it's been everybody that I talk to always kind of puts that the last couple of years, they look pre-COVID, they look post-COVID. For me, it's been more like pre-flow, post-flow, which happened to be kind of like in that same COVID moment. So my transition over from Canary to Flow started about a year before COVID. Actually, I knew in my mind that was where I was headed, and was working through a bit of a long-term plan with the ownership in the team at Canary, because I didn't want to leave Canary and leave it in a way that wouldn't be healthy. And so really was COVID allowed me to put myself out of a job at Canary and then basically step right in with Flow and partner with Graham, who you and the team hosted us 3 weeks ago. We were down there.
Yeah, it looks like November 7th. I actually just pulled up the notes from that meeting.
Okay.
But yeah, it seemed like it was more recent than that, but it's actually almost a month ago.
Yeah. It's crazy. And so Graham For the community may not know, Graham is South African. That's actually where Flow was born. So Flow was born out of a system integration business based in Johannesburg. And if you don't know, most Americans don't understand the African market that well. Africa basically has a huge amount of industry, right? You were just there, I think, right?
Yeah. Oh, I spoke in Africa, but yeah, I didn't go. Okay. I'm going next year.
Okay, got it. Incredible industry. Basically, South Africa tends to be one of the big hubs for sub-Saharan Africa manufacturing. And so Graham and team birthed Flow out of a system integrator that was very heavy Wonderware, did not have a good answer in the Wonderware stack for what Flow used to do. I met Graham and the team basically from using them as integrators for Canary, and then they spun up a distribution business that started distributing Flow, distributing Canary, still does, distributes Ignition.
That's Element 8, right? That's the Element 8 business?
Yep. And I think they do Stratus, and I think they're doing Sepasoft as well now.
So for those of you that don't know, so Flow software is flow-software.com. You've heard me talk about Flow since probably, 2019, 2018, something like that. Jeff and I we met in North Carolina, right? Did we leave? We met at CSIA Executive Conference, right? Is that where we met?
First time, yeah, but it wasn't North Carolina. This would have been, did you go to Puerto Rico?
I did not go to Puerto Rico. I did Florida. I met you in Florida. I met you in
Fort Lauderdale.
Yeah, I met you in Fort Lauderdale. Right. So I did Fort Lauderdale, and then we did, and when I met Jeff, he was there with Canary. I knew Canary only passingly, and what I knew it at, and here's how I knew of Canary history, Canary's historian. Their real value in the market, kind of what they were known, was like this compression technology that their founder created, like in the 80s or something. I mean, it was the way that they handle historical data, basically take time series that's really rows and columns of data and compress it into a flat file that they can compress quickly and decompress very, very quickly, so that when you are visualizing it in a trend, you have no idea that it's not backed by time series in a database. So that was kind of what Canary was known for. That's what I knew it as. And I was pitching to Jeff at the time, you guys need to partner with inductive automation, and inductive automation needs to use Canary as their historian, right?
Yeah.
That was our initial, we really hit it off. And then the Flow partnership already existed between Canary, and he introduced me to Graham. And then Graham did a presentation to me of Flow, which I had never seen before. I had never heard of Flow. I knew of Canary, and I was blown away by Flow. And I was like, holy crap, there are like two fundamental things about the platform that are totally different than everything else in the market. Number one,
real quick, this is just for the audience, we're talking 2016.
Yeah. This is years and years and years ago, right? And the two things that stood out about that platform way back then was...
Hold on, I'm going to tell you, because I remember you geeked out. I remember you getting excited back in 2016 on the social sharing of data, right?
There was native social media capabilities where you could share within Teams and with Slack, you could collaborate on data analysis inside of social platforms, which was crazy. That was native.
That was the first one. And then the second one was the projections.
Correct. What it was linear regression was built into the data analysis. So say I wanted to build a chart of, let's say what I wanted to do was create a measure, which was going to be my production aggregate over a shift. Right. Well, just natively, I could turn on linear regression, and it would automatically predict based on, say I had 6 hours of a 12-hour shift complete, it would predict where I would likely end up. And what was amazing was it was actually very advanced algorithms they were using. The linear regression they were doing was incredibly accurate, because they weren't just doing an X of Y algorithm. They were doing really advanced analytics. And so what we ended up doing was, I think I went to San Francisco, and I met Graham and Lenny were at a show out in San Francisco, and then we
Mm-hmm.
went out to dinner and did a much deeper dive on the technology. And I'm like,
Yep.
holy shit, these guys really, like, this isn't a flash in the pan thing. These
That's
are
right.
the guys who are going to revolutionize what I refer to as edge analytics. You have two types of analytics. You got the edge analytics, the OT, the OT analytics from L1, L2, L3, and then you've got the enterprise analytic, right? The stuff, the stuff that you do at the very top with like Power BI, et cetera, right? And where the market is terrible was on the edge analytics component. And what was has been fascinating to me to watch the journey for Flow, like how the platform has changed so much since that initial conversation, is how Flow isn't boxed into the edge analytics piece. Now Flow is moving to the, with unified analytics framework, moving to the center. And that's the reason this whole, the reason I want to have you on the podcast was, if you look at your career and your move from Canary to Flow, obviously the market, you could see where the market's going, right?
Yeah.
And so my question to you is, well, I want to talk a little bit more about Flow, especially the stuff you guys showed me at the beginning of the month, but also, but let's have the conversation about the market. Where do you see, if there's anybody in the market, whose opinion I respect? Hey, I really, you talk to a lot of people. You're the guy who everyone loves, right? You don't burn bridges. That's my skill.
Try not to burn bridges.
But you can read the tea leaves. You can read the tea leaves. You have the conversations. Where are you seeing the market going, and why, and how is that driving your decisions in your career?
Yeah. Can I tell a little backstory?
Yeah, man. Tell the story. Tell away.
You know this, but I've had imposter syndrome since I came into industrial automation. You and I have talked about this, right? So my background is not engineering. There's no programming language that I've ever learned. I took a boot camp on Java and did okay on that. So,
well, you're pretty, but I've seen you. I mean, listen, you may have imposter syndrome, but relative to other people in marketing and business development, you are way more technically fluent. I mean, you can use regex I know software developers who can't use regex. And right.
That was by necessity. But no, so my background, right? My background's in business management. That's what business management, sales, and marketing. That's what I've done my whole life. I never realized I was good at it until later on when I tried to make a career out of it, right? But I was that kid in middle school that when a fundraiser came out, right? And my daughter just brought one of these home. You've got, if you sell X number, you get this prize. If you sell X number, you get this prize. Man, I lived out in the country. I didn't live in a development. I lived on a road where houses were on 5 acres or more, farms, and I won that thing every single time. And I just never thought anything of that, right? So later in life, I realized, oh, wait, maybe I'm wired to do more relational type of work. Anyway, my background was in the auto industry. And for 13 years, I was part of managing auto dealerships. So I bring that up because when I started in that in 2003, 2004, do you know what you would have to do to figure out what your car's value was on a trade as a customer?
No.
Yeah, you'd have to actually mail off to a company called Kelly and buy a small little booklet.
Oh, the blue book.
That you'd have to thumb through, or you'd buy a black wholesale book. Do you know what you'd have to do to figure out what the invoice on the car was that you wanted to purchase? Yeah, you couldn't. Like, they were locked away in a vault and you would never find out that information, right? So that's the market I started in. When I left the auto industry, you'd buy a vehicle online and you'd never talk to the dealership, and it would get delivered to you, right? So my point in that is, when I entered the auto world, there was no such thing as a CRM. There was no such thing as the internet. Well, that's not true. There was the internet. There was no such thing as internet sales or internet communication. Customers weren't emailing dealerships yet. I lived through that digital transformation, and our group thrived in that because we had ownership, and I got mentored by men that put customer first in every decision they made. In fact, I sent a text to the guy that invested in me the other day, and was just thanking him again. Because there's so many things that I do every day that I think about what Bill Barnes taught me. And one of the things that he taught me is, Jeff, you make every decision without the money involved.
Right.
If somebody's in the wrong and it takes $5 to make them happy, don't make them happy. But if someone's in the right and it takes $50,000 to make them happy, make them happy.
Make them happy.
Right.
Do the right thing.
Yeah. Anyway, so all of these little principles is what I learned. And then,
which, by the way, is part of the reason you and I, we're kindred spirits, right? I believe that you get out of the world what you put into it. I believe that the money takes care of itself as long as you're providing value. Focus on the value, don't focus on the money. I mean, part of the reason we get along, and obviously our faith, we have intersections with faith and all that, but the part, our business philosophies are very similar, and that's and this is why I say values-based relationships are so important. The commercials will take care of themselves. Find the people who share your values. Right. And if you want to know why it is Jeff and I are, why I hold Jeff in such a high regard, from a professional perspective, you're the best in the biz. But that's not the reason I hold you in high regard. I hold you in high regard because of the human being you are. And then you manifest the professional success from the type of human being you are. And that's important. It's a very, very important distinction.
Well, I appreciate that, but people are going to start hopping out of this.
You owe me butterscotch now.
You and I need to go get a tandem bicycle and take a ride through the park and hold hands or something.
I'll bring the flowers.
All right. So I lived through a digital transformation and was taught and learned some hard lessons about how to thrive through that by putting the customer first, by embracing interoperability, by embracing transparency as a core value, and treating people fairly, right? When all the cards are on the table, the only thing you can do is look at someone and say, let's find a win-win here. Fair for you, fair for us. So imagine my shock in 2012 when I learned that there's an entire industry out here called manufacturing, industrial automation. Yeah. And in order to engage with a company, a hardware or software company that does business inside of this, you don't get to know their pricing.
Right.
Not in the first 3 or 4 engagements. If you're a customer of theirs, you have to pay them X percentage of what you bought from them forever. And if you don't, and you wanted to buy more license, they won't let you. I was blown away.
The only people who accept that are the people who have they're numb to it. The only people who accept that and don't think it's crazy are those who are numb to it. When you bring someone out from the outside and you tell them this is how it works, this is why young people in our industry are always so flabbergasted. Right. It's like they're like, what is this?
Right. So then I met the guys at Canary. I was basically told by a friend who worked for Canary, no, our software is as good as this other company called OSiSoft, and they're doing $300 million a year of revenue. We're way back here. We're struggling to get our feet underneath of us, and we're trying to figure out the how. And I thought, oh my goodness, what an opportunity! So I spent I think 2 months. I took my day off at the dealership that I was running. It so happened that Canary corporate office was in my hometown. I would spend my day off at their office just trying to learn. And at the end of a month or two, I gave the owners a business plan. I said, hey, here's what I would do if I was you. I think you're going to see your market disrupted. Why don't you be the disruptor, right? At the time, I think one of the 8 items that I provided was, hey, your pricing is currently like a 20% discount of OSiSoft. And, there's no such thing as unlimited. Like everything's got a limit. It's hard for me to imagine something on a thumb drive being $1 million, right? Like that's weird.
Yep.
That's weird. And they embraced a lot of those ideas. And then it ended up them saying, hey, would you come work for us? And I said, I spent a couple months and thought about it and made one big pivot.
Well, let me ask you this question, because, and again, at the risk of sounding like a fanboy, which,
No, you're good.
But, of all the, your expertise is in marketing and business development. And I would say also strategic partnerships. That's another where you're really, really good. Right. And business development in our industry is all about trying to define what problems your solution solves, like
Right.
having a catalog, a list of all those solutions, then going to your potential market and finding out what their problems are and seeing if they have the problem you solve, right? And then connecting the two.
Yeah.
Well, you know, one of the things that's always stood out to me about you is your technical fluency. Like while you're not an engineer, while you're not a software developer in professionally, and you're not trained that way in,
Right.
you haven't been educated as an engineer or a software developer. You have very high technical fluency. You also have very high digital fluency, but you openly admit you come from a background where that wasn't your expertise. So when you made the move from basically selling cars to, and by doing it at a very high level, you haven't told any of the, like, how it is you really, it was Honda you were with, right? And this big, you didn't just sell cars, you
No, I stopped selling cars like 11 years into that relationship.
Right.
I was managing businesses with 100 people or more. That was.
But how did you make, like, what is the like, if you were going to give advice to people in business development who are joining this industry for the first time and they want to gain technical fluency? I mean, I've seen, Jeff, you build demos. You don't have an engineer build the demo, you build it. And you'll do a screen share with me and you go, oh, I built this, Walker, did I do it right? And I'm like, yeah, not only did you do it right, how the hell did you do that, Jeff? You're not an engineer. Or when you guys added in the asset, I don't remember what you guys call it, but asset management in Canary.
Yeah.
And you were going to be doing pattern matching using regex so that you could take flat historical tags and turn that into an asset model. You were the one who was writing the regex pattern. And I'm like, how is he doing that? This isn't your background. So what is the approach that you took, and what's the advice you would give to other people on gaining technical fluency? Because obviously that gives you a huge advantage in the market.
It does.
I wasn't even going to ask you that, but I just started thinking, man, that's the story he should tell.
Yeah. Well, thanks. So, I think it's hard to know. Everybody's going to have different things that they can and cannot learn. Like that's the reality, right?
Aptitude, right? That comes from aptitude.
Right. I struggle with learning foreign languages. Like it doesn't, that's something that I can really put some time in. I traveled to Japan and I wanted to learn 20 phrases to be able to communicate, and it did not come easy. I had to really, really, really work at it. And the reality is, Walker, I could spend the next 10 years of my life, I will probably never be able to be fluent in Japanese. Right?
Okay.
Just not going to probably be able to do that. And I worked with guys at Canary that put in the time and from the sales side that would really put in the time and want to be pros on the product, but certain things just were never going to click for them to be able to learn regex or things like that. I think God wired me to be able to pick up certain things with minimal effort. I think you're wired that way too. There's certain things you just look at and they click for you.
Right.
I always did well in school. I could have gone down a stronger path in the mathematics or in sciences. I have been fascinated with psychology and communication most of my life. That's the path that I went down.
Because you have you have really high emotional intelligence, right? And that would be the.
Yeah. Don't ask my wife that question, but. Sure. But yeah, so, the reality is, back to your question, for me, I don't feel comfortable recommending something to someone else on any level, professionally or in a friendship, if it's not something that I have firsthand knowledge of. So how am I ever going to sell if I don't know the pain points, the rough edges, the sharp bits, and the good parts, of course, of the product that I'm representing? So it was important to me that if I'm going to establish myself in a new industry, representing a product, I need to know that product better than anybody else that's ever going to represent this product, period. There's no exception for that from the standard I hold myself to. I'm still not there with Flow, by the way. So Lenny is better than me on Flow, but I'm going to beat him. It's just going to take me another couple months, I think. So that was my goal with Canary, and I think it should be every salesperson's goal, period. You may not have the ability to get there on your own. That doesn't mean you don't hold yourself accountable to it. And when you realize what you can't learn or where you're just not going to get, and then you find the partnership inside of your organization to get you that extra step, right? That's where the sales engineer role maybe needs partnered with a really high relational person.
So let's pivot over to the flow piece real quick, because one of the things, so a little background here, because I want to talk about kind of the direction where flow is going. And so we had this, you guys were here for a whole day. We did a whole day worth of sessions earlier in November. And the idea was, hey, Walker, we want to come see the team. So it was you and Lenny, or you and Graham came in. Graham is now based here in the States. He's from South Africa, but he's now based here in the States. And Flow's offices are in Austin, right? Is that the yep? And then
so we became a U.S. based company in 2018, and now are slowly moving all operations to the U.S.
And so one of the things was, hey, let's show you where we're going. Let's look out. We were going to show you some of the new feature sets, and we're also going to talk to you about what's in the roadmap. So it was very impressive. I mean, in a lot of those of you who have not worked with Flow, and let's say you go look up Flow software and you want to ask the question, what is Flow, right? And by the way, this has been a running joke for a long time. If you want to try and answer what Flow is, it can be very challenging because Flow is many things. And in fact, we created a Venn diagram on our whiteboard to say, let's look at Flow and then let's compare it to all the things that it intersects with, right? So Flow has some similarities to Ignition because it's an IIoT platform, right? It has some similarities to Seek because it does analytics. It has some similarities to Power BI because of the dashboarding capabilities with it, right? We basically showed all the intersections. It had similarities now with the new feature set to HiByte. There's intersection with data operations, right? And so what's most people, it's important for people to understand is Flow is unlike anything else in the market. There is not a apples to apples 100% comparison. Like if you had OSiPi and you're comparing it to Canary Labs,
right?
It's basically a 95% apples to apples comparison. They're just attacking the market differently and using different tech, but the functions for the business were basically the same. Right? You have asset frames and event frames in OSiPi, and you have whatever you guys called, asset modeling in Canary. There were different terms, but they were the same thing. Flow is unlike any one product in the market. It is, it's an intersection of many products, but its bread and butter is short time to value on edge analytics. That's its bread and butter for me. I can take data I've been historizing, I can connect to that data, and then I can transform that data, and then I can create analysis with that data very quickly, seamlessly, beautifully. But let me ask you this, Jeff, if you were going to tell people today what Flow is and what it will be next year in go-to-market strategy, how would you describe it? And what is it you would want people to know? And by the way, this is a totally unsponsored, we're talking about Flow because the audience should definitely know about where Flow's going. That's the reason we're having the conversation. But how would you describe it to the audience?
Yeah. I have found the first thing I have to do is understand who I'm talking to. Yeah. Because, right, at the end of the day, I always need to understand someone's need in order to put something as a solution to a problem in front of them. But let's just say I'm talking to somebody who's involved in the operation side of an organization. They're in a facility. They're part of a manufacturing team. I'm going to simply set the table by saying, you and your company have invested for decades on collecting as much data as you possibly can from every different part of your operation. Right. That's what's happening with my sensors. Who are my people? What are we supposed to be making for what customers? Where are my raw goods coming from? All of these are separate databases.
Yes.
And that's great. Right. And right now you can look at any one of those databases and you can understand what the current value is. Easy enough. And in fact, that's where the UNS really comes through.
It's a snapshot of right now. It is literally current state.
Yep. And with some context, I can understand a little bit, but that's not analytics.
Sorry.
No, you're good. If we're going to improve our process and do the jobs that we're supposed to be doing, I have to be able to analyze data from multiple data sources immediately.
Right.
And I have to be able to do it quickly to get the competitive edge. That means I need a tool that's easy to use, that brings all of that data into one place or unites those data sources. And when I run that calculation, can easily deliver it to that now environment, to the UNS.
Yes.
And that's what Flow does. Flow gives someone who has the ability to move a mouse and drag a tag from one side of the screen to the other side of the screen to begin to understand what was the mean time between downtime on this line yesterday, and how does that compare to the 30-day average?
How many connectors? So one of the things that when you guys were showing, when you were demoing the new platform, you connected to a series of data sources, and those data sources were basically on the right-hand side of the environment. And then on the left-hand side, they were creating a namespace that was essentially an abstraction of data points. And then what they were doing was they were taking data from each of those connections and they were just mapping them into the namespace. And then in the middle, they were running the functional tools inside of Flow to convert data points from, say, imagine you're taking two data points and you want to multiply them together to get you a third data point. They're doing that on steroids. They're doing very advanced aggregations. They're doing they have an expression language built in that gives you the ability to do mathematical computations based on conditions. It's very, very impressive. But the output, this is the big difference. You can tell if software is back-end API UI, what you are working with Flow is the UI, right? You're working with the UI to do stuff in the API, and the API will give you your connectors, all stuff. When I asked Graham about the openness of the platform, he even said, "Oh yeah, our API is wholly open. So you have the ability to use Flow without our UI at all. Like you can just use our functions, the functional capabilities of Flow to do what is, I say, the connect, the collect, the store, the analyze, and the visualize, but also the find patterns, report, and solve. All Flow is the only platform that can do all those things. That means the connect, the data acquisition, the data operation, the data aggregation, the data analytics, and plus all the visual. It's literally the only platform that does all of it. And then takes the result in a semantic hierarchy with state and puts it in a unified namespace for other nodes in the ecosystem to consume from. It's really...
So let's break that down real quick. You've identified essentially what you're excited about is what I saw 3 years ago or 4 years. I don't know how long ago it was. In 2018, 2019. That's what I saw as the potential in Flow. It wasn't, as a product, it wasn't there just yet, but I knew the leadership. I knew Graham, I knew Lenny, I knew Vaughn, Leon, and I wanted to work with them. Before it was the software, it was the people that drew me in. I couldn't, and I love the guys at Canary. I couldn't shake this feeling that I needed to find a way to work and partner with Graham and Lenny. It just was here. And then I started having a serious conflict on the historian side. So I was watching OSiSoft, watching Asset Framework, PyAF, and watching the stranglehold it was having on customers. And here's the scenario. Now think that a lot of people haven't thought about this, but think about this. If you build your analytics framework
inside of Pi
on top of the historian, let's say you're really successful, you've got a competitive edge, you're going to acquire assets. Every time you acquire a new asset and it's not using that historian, that vendor, what do you have to do?
Well, what's even crazier is let's talk about event frames and asset frames and OSiPi. My biggest complaint, when people ask me, Walker, why do you shit on OSiPi? Well, it's really simple. You're going to build an event frame or an asset frame inside of OSiPi to create value for your business. And that value is going to be data operations, context, and normalization of data. So you're going to transform data into information, you're going to give it context, and you're going to normalize it in one event. You need that for machine learning later. And when you first start your journey, you're not doing ML. You're doing connect, collect, store, analyze, visualize. ML starts later, right? But you got to make sure that the way you do connect, collect, store, analyze, visualize sets you up to be able to do ML later. Okay. You're going to, in OSiPi, ostensibly, you are going to use asset frames and event frames to get you data normalization and data context, which is the cleansing of the data for machine learning algorithms later. Well, guess what? Asset frames and event frames are OSiPi IP. They don't see it as your intellectual property. It's their intellectual property. So they do not expose the context and the normalization of the data outside of the OSiPi ecosystem. It's one of my number one complaints. I'm like, wait, you want me to use your platform to normalize and contextualize my data to get it to a single event, and then I can only use it in your platform? You've got to be kidding me. That's like, this is the argument you and I would have at Canary all the time. Canary was wide open. It was literally what it was like. If you're going to build value inside of our platform, we're going to give you the ability to take it in its form and get it out to non-Canary partners. OSiPi doesn't do that. In fact, they make it really, really, really hard, even if you decided you wanted to invest millions of dollars in doing it. When you look at Flow, it's the same philosophy. The philosophy was, wait a minute, if you're going to create value in our platform, it's not value that stays in our platform. It's value we're going to expose to the ecosystem. And that is a fundamental shift.
That's what I ran into
in the market.
That's what I ran into it. So here we are at Canary, and we're seeing the necessity for asset framework, right? We see this need to analyze data at the historian level, but then you have this question of, well, we're a time series database. In order to really provide the needs of a plant, we have so much relational and transactional data that needs to come in to be contextualized, to contextualize our time series data. And then it's like, well, does that make sense? Does it make sense to do all of that? And we thought, no, let's just make it really easy to export the data into wherever it needs to go. And then there's this question, okay, well, where does it need to go? And that's where I saw Flow as being such a capable tool. If they added the concept of tags, and I started talking to Graham, and
they had measures to begin with. The measure was the object. They didn't have tag structure, which has changed. That's the new right. That's the direction you pushed.
And when I talked to Graham about it, and he was all on board about putting tags in, that's when I knew. Okay, so we've got a platform that doesn't care what the historian is, doesn't care what the SCADA system is, doesn't care what the underlying version of SQL databases that you need to connect to, can now capture real-time data from an OPC server or an MQTT broker, and has an open interoperable platform that will send data on trigger, on schedule, on demand, or on change now to any other solution that I want it to go to. And that's great. Forget that though. It's not just sending the information that's been processed. It's the concept of, I'm going to expose a single endpoint that anything in my ecosystem can ask me to go get raw data from any system I'm connected to, bring it into a standardized format, and then hand it off.
So, and this is an important thing. So, we actually had this in a diagram on the board. I didn't know that this was the direction they were going. This is a very important thing. Not only are you exposing the result of the work that you're doing inside of Flow, you are also exposing the ability to create new workflows through Flow by exposing the endpoint. For example, if Flow has connections to 3 data sources, okay, and inside of the Flow, inside the engineering environment, I went in there and what I did was I took 3 values from data source 1, 3 values from data source 2, and 1 value from data source 3, and then I created a couple of new parameters that are going to live inside of Flow, okay, and I put those all together in a template, okay, and then I I do all my work in the flow front end, and then I execute it and I backfill all the data. And now what I've got is all these data points, my calculations plus my outputs, all that's exposed, right? And by the way, not everyone does that, but you guys do that. But here's the ad. I also have the ability from outside of Flow to hit Flow and create a new workflow. From those 3 data sources, I can pick 3 new data points, and I can do all those things outside of the Flow engineering environment, which the truth is doesn't exist. Like most platforms don't even think about that. Like it's also, it's like treating Flow as a broker for all the data connections.
And this is I've realized over the last year that we're in front of the market on this.
Yes, definitely.
We're in front of it. We're definitely in front of the need, from the awareness of the need to ask for this feature. But the difficulty, you just ran into the thing that plagues me every day, is trying to explain that concept in less than 15 seconds can be tough. I say it like this. Let's say in Flow, you make a model of a throughput calculation. You've got good, you've got bad tags representing rejects and good units. And now I've got that model at 10 sites. Every one of those sites is using a different vendor of historian. I can ask Flow to reach down to the historians and give me the raw data for good and bad for the last 90 days. And Flow understands what that tag's called in the historian and how to query it. I don't ever have to do that as a data scientist ever again.
All you're doing is going to the endpoint created in Flow that then goes to the raw data point. It creates the abstraction. I want to go one other really advanced feature, which we would never talk about. If say you're a data scientist, you're a data analyst, right? It's obvious that what Flow is trying to do is turn everyone into citizen data analysts. Obviously, that's the idea, right? One of the things that stands out to me is like if you're not a data scientist and you have never tried to do data analysis on data points from multiple data sources. So let's say what I wanted to do. If you've never done that before, you have no idea what the challenges are in doing that. But let's say I wanted to do something as simple as putting together the data point from a sensor coming out of a PLC that is updating once every 25 milliseconds. Okay. I have set up my polling where I'm going to store that data point in the historian every 50 milliseconds. So I'm going to have one measurement for every 50 milliseconds on that sensor. And we'll say this is a sensor with a floating point value. Okay. Then what I want to do is I want to compare that with another sensor that is being stored every 1 second. Okay. And that comes from a different data source. And then what I want to do is I want to also compare that with, say, an availability calculation on that. So downtime availability on the asset that's coming from a third data source, and that's being calculated every 1 minute. All right. One of the challenges you would run into, you run into two of those. How do you context is just putting the three together. Normalization is having one value. You go to the highest resolution data point and you create a value at that resolution for everything. Okay. So if it's 50 milliseconds, let's say that my availability calculation was 0.9 for the next 60 seconds. At 50 milliseconds, I've got 200 data points in every second. So I need to have 200 of 0.9 for every 1 second so that it's lined up with the 50 milliseconds. Okay. That's what I would need to do. All right. That's just one problem. The next problem is,
well, can I just start by saying you haven't even yet created a database to ingest this data in and start to work with it. So there's the first problem. Where am I going to do this?
And moreover, the other bigger one is they're not using the same clocks. So you have
they're not using the same
They have clocks. 3 data sources, all with different clocks. So one of the things that blows my mind about Flow, and this is like some of the unappreciated technology. And we never even really talked about it when you guys did the demo. the algorithms that you guys have, that Lenny and whoever the team, I'm assuming Lenny is one of the developers of the platform, right? He knows under the hood.
No. Lenny's really more on the implementation
Right.
side. Lenny's just
wrote the algorithms. Who's the guy who writes the?
So you're looking at, I would say, a 4-man team. The key developers are going to be Graham, Leon, Rickus, and Vaughn.
All right. The algorithms that they obviously had to write their own algorithms to be able to determine which clock to use and how to line that data up. So when you do your backfill of your data source, you're basically taking these data points, you've got your data sources, you're going to do the data operation, and then you're going to backfill it. So I'm going to backfill it 30 days. So I can look at a chart over the last 30 days. You have to run that through an algorithm to get all the data points lined up so your calculations are correct. One of Flow's greatest abilities is the algorithms that they've written to get that right. And only a data scientist is going to appreciate that. Like only someone who's doing data analysis. And like when you talk about checking off the boxes, that's an advanced thing. We normally wouldn't even talk about that in a podcast. But Flow does that better than any other platform I have ever come in contact with. Like if Flow is good at anything, it is the process of developing the process for accurate and effective data analytics. That developing the process. But let me ask you this, Jeff. Yeah. What is let's say someone gets started with Flow. Let's talk about the digital maturity, right? Their fluency increases over time. What does a typical engagement look like in the beginning? I install Flow for the first time. What is a typical use case in my proof of concept? And then how am I using it a year later or 2 years later? Because obviously that looks totally different, right? They're only scratching the surface in a POC. And then they've got, can you kind of walk through what a genealogy is? And maybe that will help illustrate to people.
Absolutely. Yeah. First engagements is usually not just for technology's sake, right?
Right.
Like, this is all really cool. Like we're right now, we are just triggering every enterprise architect's dream come true right now, right? But at the end of the day, that's not who I'm talking to each day. I wish it was, but that's not who I'm talking to each day. I'm talking to men and women on the front line that have a problem to solve. And that problem is around, I've been told I need to do this, or I want to do this. I need this piece of data readily available for me to be able to make a decision off of. So what does that look like? I'll give you an example I heard yesterday. I want to know true cost per unit for the last 1,000 units produced.
Okay.
That's what I need. Okay.
So you end up with with a dashboard that's displaying a value in a tag tree where you've gone through the workflow to consume the data points you need to calculate it, to backfill the data, and then do the calculation and put it in a place where it can be visualized. And then you've got a visual on a screen. Yeah. That's an example of a proof of concept.
Yep.
Okay.
That's 3 databases I'm going to have to probably hit. I need a personnel database, I need a time series database, and I need to understand something that tells me what my raw goods are costing me, right? Okay. Easy enough. Like that's such an easy problem to actually solve.
That's something you could do in a business development call if you have access to the databases.
If you had the databases set up, I could do it for you in 20 minutes. Actually, no, for me, I might struggle to figure out how to write the script to keep look only at the last 1,000 units.
Right.
But Lenny, Graham, you would knock that out of the park. So that actually, because of the business model that we've adopted, that single little use case will show an ROI on Flow.
Right, because you're basically landing, you're getting Flow installed at an annual subscription cost.
Annual subscription,
unlimited. Right. You're getting it in the environment. You're solving the first problem of many problems you're going to solve with Flow, but that first problem is getting you the ROI.
That's right. Right. And then here's what happens. What happens is the person that championed that now has this tool that they now see that they can drag this over. And here's what they have. They now have a KPI that shows in Flow, this is my cost per 1,000 units. So what is the very next thing that they do? They drag that KPI and they look, okay, how does it compare this shift over last
Right.
shift, today over yesterday. And then they say, oh, well, I need more context. I need to bring in the operator and the supervisor IDs that were on this line. And then it becomes, okay, well, how's this operator compared to this operator when it comes to driving cost? Oh, interesting. Okay. And so now it's a coaching tool. Now this operator is understanding a little bit more. And they're like, well, where did you calculate? What's this look like? Or this supervisor's like, well, where did you get that? Oh, hey, I see you've got production numbers here. Could you take today and slice it by product and give me a count by product also? Well, sure. Yeah, we can do that. Okay, well, can you get me waste on that? What did we lose in waste? Oh, and who was the number one contributor to that? Why did we lose that? Look, one of our core values at Flow is stay curious.
Right.
It's kind of fun, Walker, because I've never actually been part of a company before where the core values of the company drive product development.
Wow.
So our core values actually represent what we're trying to build a product to be able to do. And one of those is stay curious. So if you don't have a licensing restriction, if you've already made your ROI, if the barrier to entry is extremely low from a technical standpoint, and you have a tool that is encouraging people to gather around it and collaborate, what's going to happen?
Right. What you're gonna do is you're gonna create a platform upon which all people stand to solve all future problems. And what's really crazy is the ROI piece is, you basically need $1,000 a month ROI on your first proof of concept to be net positive. You basically need to save $1,000 a month on your POC to get your money back.
Yeah, it's $14,000 a year, so I think it's like $1,200 bucks.
I mean, and that is such a low number. I mean, when you're looking at the ROI calculations that push purchase orders, they are enormous numbers. They're aiming for, right? I mean, the investment is so low.
Bill Barnes told me, break it down to the ridiculous. Thank you, Bill. The ridiculous is $1.60 an hour. That's the operational cost to run a flow license on a 24/7.
$1.60 an hour.
$1.60.
Yeah, it's not. Since you've given a shout out to your mentors, I have two. There's three that I play a huge role in my life. Obviously, Joe Rolfe is the one who got me into this industry. He, without Joe, I wouldn't be here. Lenny Rosenfield, one of the greatest supervisor I ever worked with in my entire life, and gave me the best job interview I've ever had. Never asked me a single controls question. He asked me all physics-based questions. And Mary Emily Slate, who's an executive at Nucor Steel, she was a general manager I worked under, who fundamentally, she literally taught me what leadership was. And without Mary Emily Slate, I would not be the leader I am today. Like, and these are relationships I still have to this day. Mentorship is very, very important. And since you've given Bill a shout out a couple of times, I want to make sure I give a shout out. So let me ask you this. We have a couple minutes left, but where's Flow going? Let's say people have already taken a look at Flow. They hear me mention it. Let's talk a little bit about where Flow is going in 2024 and beyond. Because what I saw in the beginning of November is like all a game changer. I mean, a significant game changer. And your vision of the unified analytics framework is, it's coming to reality. I mean, yours and Lenny's vision, or Graham's vision.
Graham,
it's coming. It's coming to fruition. So, what should people be prepared for with Flow in the next year and beyond?
Yeah, lower bar to entry, easier to use, faster time to value. That's really my push. Is I want someone to be able to pick up Flow, download it, 15 minutes later, have value with it. So we joined SESMII 4 months ago. We're very interested in what SESMII is doing. I'm interested in SESMII from first and foremost, just from an education campaign. The first time I heard John Dyke present what SESMII is all about, breaking down these stovepipe architectures, it's like, well, this is something we need to be behind. I was personally skeptical, more or less around, man, they're really heavy on OPC. What's this all about? We see flow as an opportunity to be a bridge between an OPC information profile and any other type of information model that you want to build. And so we're actively working on how we will be able to ingest and also to translate and to share models that have been built in Flow.
So the profiles that you create. So for those of you who don't know SESMII, just real quick, like SESMII is the Smart Manufacturing Institute. I'm fairly certain they're a not-for-profit, and they are funded by federal government. So the U.S. government funds them, and their mission is to proliferate smart manufacturing at scale in the United States. I was on a panel with John Dyke in September at the Operations Calling for Tulip, and John used that stovepipe analogy. He also had some really great data on like where SESMII grew out of was the total number of mouse clicks they used to convert data. Like I have all these data in all these silos, the total number of mouse clicks it requires to turn that data into information and make it valuable was a barrier to entry for rank and file manufacturers, and they're trying to overcome that. My fundamental issue with SESMII has to do with the OPC relationship. I agree with you 1,000%. Flow would be the perfect way, the perfect bridge between that OPC ecosystem and what we see as IIoT protocols. Moreover, one other thing, SESMII is driven, they have this open profile concept where you will create a profile, which we refer to as a data or information model, and then you can deploy those across an ecosystem. Inside of Flow, they have templates, which a template equals a profile in SESMII. And I'm assuming you're saying that you're going to be able to share those templates as profiles with the SESMII ecosystem and consume back from that ecosystem as well, right?
That's our goal. Yeah, that's our goal. Also, in the very short term, embracing GraphQL
excellent.
As well. We talked about that, I think, a couple weeks ago. And then we have a rewrite we're getting ready to start a rewrite of a lot of our product. It's been 12 years. We've just moved the product over to .NET 6. So, I commend our team, even though the product is 12 years old, it doesn't really show its age and its ability to be distributed from an architectural standpoint. So they've stayed on top of that, but we're looking at a Kubernetes solution that will allow more of the configuration of the tool to either be done from a command line or to be done in a browser if you want that UI. And so that's a pretty big lift to move that way. My personal goal, you and I haven't talked about this, so this will be new to you. I know you're there for manufacturing jobs in the United States. I love system integration shops, and I personally believe that there's a lot of system integrators that are going to be in a lot of trouble, and they've been so busy. They've been so busy that they haven't been able to set themselves up to grow into the next step of services. And that next step of services is not about programming PLCs, and it's not about installing historians. That next step of services has to do with the analysis of data and good data management practices. So it's going to be tough for a lot of integrators to compete in that space if they're not already thinking that way. How do they do this? So one of the goals that we have is to build a product that an integrator who is not there now will be able to take the deep knowledge they have about the way that a piece of equipment should run and be able to build a model of that equipment that they can then manage and deploy as a service to their end users. And so what we're hoping to build is an all-inclusive platform that a system integrator would be able to spin up multiple versions of our software, deploy them to the field, manage them centrally, keep a template library of the integration work, and be able to sell that service through the platform to those end users on a regular basis. So analytics as a service focused on helping integrators take that next step.
And that's something right now what people try to do is like black box code inside of the PLC, which obviously, and it's a brilliant concept. I mean, I'll say that. So for those of you who want to, I strongly encourage you to check out Flow. Again, this is not sponsored. The whole reason we're doing this is because what I saw at the beginning of November, I'm like, holy shit, the community needs to see where this platform is going and get ahead of it, because, the interest of full disclosure, I at Intellic Integration at our systems integrator, we haven't written PLC code in a couple of years. We have not had a single project where we wrote a PLC program in, say, the last 2 years. We see where the market's going. I mean, the market is the right now, I think there's something like 14,000 systems integrators. You take those 14,000 systems integrators and you break them up, and you take a look at what they actually do. The vast majority of them do automation. Okay, 80% or something. If you look at their billable rates, they continue to drop and drop and drop. If you look at their conversion rates, they continue to drop and drop and drop. The demand for automation is still high, but the ability to deliver it in a short time to value is getting higher and higher and higher. So what's happening is the ability to deliver automation it doesn't take nearly as much work now. And so if you have a business that's all based on automation, well, you're going to be competing for more projects, but in a shorter timeline. Everything's going to be delivered in a couple of weeks as opposed to 12 to 16 weeks or 24 to 36 week schedules. And also, ChatGPT makes writing PLC code, especially in structured text, basically like it's essentially automated. I mean, and by the way, your customers are going to figure it out. This year, we've did about 30% of our work that we did this last year was all advanced analytics. So machine learning, predictive analytics, artificial intelligence for manufacturers. We anticipate at Intellic next year, that's going to be 50%. So 50% of every hour we bill is going to be in some ML capability, some advanced analytics capability. We see where the market's going, and we're just pivoting and focusing all of our efforts in those areas. And we are viewing with our own eyes the limitations of the platforms that we use to provide these tools. And a lot of what you showed me in the beginning of November is closing all those gaps, man. I mean, you guys you're taking the right approach. No one else is taking that approach, and you really have the market cornered once adoption ramps up. I mean, it's pretty nuts. So for those of you who want to try it out, you can go to flow-software.com. You get what we do. I do it all the time. Download the software. Yep. And
I would also just
go ahead.
Shout out real quick though. Inside of this community, we've got some incredible partners. Yes. So as much as I'd love for you to go to the Flow's website and download the software and try it, if you're an end user and you're looking for someone to guide you, can we just Intellic, Skellig, Galarus, Ectobox, and I apologize if I've dropped a partner or two off of that.
Well, Copar is going to be in there, right? Aren't you?
Yeah, Copar knows Flow. Michael and the team know Flow. Reach out to them. They'd love to walk you through it. And of course, my email will be right where?
It'll be right at the bottom there. Somewhere. Yeah. And let me say one last thing. I had a meeting with Michael Dowdell, he's at Copar. Those of you who don't know Michael, he very active in the community, but behind the scenes, he doesn't really talk a whole lot, but behind the scenes, he's very active. He and I get together and have hour-long calls together. We were talking about technology recently. We had a call last month, and I was asking him what he's the highest on. Michael, what are you the highest on? And he said Litmus, because of Litmus's broker releasing that broker, Litmus Edge, and Flow software.
He's a good guy. There's very few people that have made me a superhero to my children. Michael Dowdell made me a superhero to my children. You ready for the craziest story of all time? I want to hear it.
Give it to me.
There's a website called GeoGuessr. If everyone right now Google GeoGuessr, here's what happens. you get a Google Map image, like Street View of Google Maps. Okay. In one window, it shows you a Google Map Street View image. Over on the other side of the browser is a map of the world, and you have a limited amount of time to drop a pin where you think you are in the world according to this Google Street image. Okay. You start watching YouTube videos of the men and women that are really good at this, it'll blow your mind. You get scored based on how close you get. I'm showing my wife and my kids for the very first time this new thing I found. And they're like, "Well, do one, Dad." I'm like, "Okay." I pull one up and I see Copar integration on a billboard on this Google Street image. And I know that Michael and his team are in Monterrey, Mexico. I go over to that map and drop Monterrey, Mexico, and got 100% perfect score one time and done. My kids think I'm the smartest man.
You did it, Dad.
Because of
my dad is the smartest guy in the world. Yes. Great story.
Oh,
all right, brother. Hey, Jeff, I appreciate you taking the time. I know you're as busy as I am. It's incredibly, I'm glad we were able to get to pull this off and coordinate it. Those of you who want to reach out to Jeff, what's your email address real quick? It's Jeff.Knepper
at flow-software.
And Knepper is spelled Knepper. All right, Jeff, thanks for joining us. Thanks, gang, for listening. Like, subscribe, comment down below, and we will see you guys in the next one.